Hi, my name is Chad Reyes. I am the host of today's panel discussion. I'm excited to have you with us today. Today, we're going to be talking about a lot of things that are changing right now with tax laws, but most important, what I want to do today is we want to provide you with value. There's a ton of stuff that's going on right now where it can be overwhelming. We see it with clients that we work with. There's so many different moving pieces with different tax and legislation, but our goal as a panel is to really just hope to provide some clarity in some of those areas so that you can get some peace and say, how do I navigate through some of these challenging times and challenging waters? With that said, I'm really encouraged to know that we have 30 different states that are representing today. So we had people who registered from 30 different states around the nation. So that's pretty cool to see that. And many of you know this, but the statistics say that 70% of the wealth doesn't make it to the second generation. 90% of the wealth doesn't make it to the third, and 97 doesn't make it to the fourth. And almost every statistic shows that it's breakdown of communication and trust, failure to prepare the next generation. But around that conversation, there's also the aspect of when things change, and there's a lot of change right now, as many of our panelists would agree. As things change, it makes it harder for our families. It makes it harder for us as advisors to communicate because there's so much moving pieces. So we're hoping today to provide you with some knowledge, some stuff that would really provide value to you, but also to make it simple so that you can navigate some of those conversations. And my wife and I are very used to being a family business. I may look young, but I'm in business close to 20 years, and my wife and I have a couple of businesses, and we know what it is to run a family business. I've had my mom work with me. I've had brother-in-laws and sister-in-laws work with me. I haven't had my siblings yet work with me, but we've had a family business, and we've been building it for the last 20 years. So we're very familiar with the world that you play in. And with that said, I'm hoping that the stuff we're going to share will provide a lot of value. It's interesting because a lot of the people that are on this call are second, third, fourth, fifth generation. So you've already understood what it takes to get to that point. Because to get to second, third, fourth, fifth generation, many of you that are on this call, it is not easy. It takes a tremendous amount of discipline and effort and intentionality. And kudos to you, because I know it's not easy. We work with families, and it is not an easy thing to get to those generations. But today, I want to share with you a quote that I heard my mentor and my wife's mentor, John Maxwell, say. We had done an event in April of 2020 for about 800 advisors nationally. And John was talking about how to lead through crisis. If you remember, we're going through the craziest time at that point, April of 2020. And he said this quote. He said, "Great leadership stands out in times of crisis because great leaders have prepared themselves for the moment. Their voice is one that responds, not reacts." So what's interesting is today we have a lot of change happening, especially around tax law. And the leaders that respond and don't react are going to be the ones that can continue their family business, continue for generations on. So we're gonna jump in a little bit. A few housekeeping items. We're going to have about a 50-minute panel discussion. So we're going to end at about 1:15. We're going to have about a 50-minute panel discussion and about a 10-minute Q&A. We may be a little bit more in Q&A depending on how long the panel discussion goes, but just for a rough format. We're also, if you have any questions, you can type them in the chat box, or you can raise your hand. And what we'll do is at the end, as the panel discussion nears to the end, my wife, who's managing the behind the scenes for the panel chat, she will open up your mic. We're going to do our best to answer as many of those questions, and if we can't, we will answer those questions after, whether it be an email or a call, but we will certainly get to your question. And with that said, I just want to introduce you to our panelists. I'm honored to say that they're my friends. They're some of the brightest people that I know, especially in their industries. And I just want to give you a little heads up of who we have on our panel today. So today we have John Dadakis. John is a partner at Fox Rothschild. They have about 950 attorneys in about 27 states. John focuses his practice on trust and estates and legacy planning, and works a lot with highly successful entrepreneurs and Fortune 500 executives. On numerous occasions, he's been named, best lawyer in America, top 100 attorneys, the world's leading trust and estate practitioner. So with that said, John has a tremendous amount of experience. And John, thank you for joining us today.
Thank you, Chad. Look forward to talking with everybody.
Great, thank you, John. And then we have Joy Matak. She is a partner and co-leader in the trust and estates part of Sachs LLP, which is an accounting practice. Sachs is a top 100 accounting firm that serves the needs of privately held companies, family-owned businesses, not-for-profit organizations, and high net worth individuals. Joy focuses her practice on trust and estates. She works with a lot of multi-generational families, owners of closely held businesses, and ultra high net worth families. Also, she's an accomplished speaker, the author of the book Estate Planning, Estate Tax, and Other Planning After the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act of 2017. So Joy, thank you for being with us today.
Yeah, thank you, Chad. I'm really excited to be here. I'm actually kind of hoping they don't change the law, because if they do, I'm going to have to write another book. So, and that'll end Christmas again for me this year. So fingers crossed.
There you go. There you go. And then I'm excited to have my friend James Prendamano. James is the CEO of Cassandra Properties. Cassandra Properties is the largest commercial real estate brokerage in Staten Island, New York, and has also been named the top 10 boutique firms in New York City. James works with real estate developers and clients with large investment real estate portfolios. James' clients include global companies such as Goldman Sachs and some of the biggest real estate developers. James has been named on numerous occasions by City and State to be one of the top 50 most influential people in New York City. James serves as a director of the New York City IDA board and a member of the New York City Resource Corporation, and has also been named one of the top 100 people in real estate by the World Real Estate and Construction Forum. And also James happens to be he is a contributor for Forbes Council. So James, thank you for spending some time with us today.
Always a pleasure, Chad. I'd like to thank the panelists for their time. It's always great to get together. Just before we kick off, Chad, don't worry, you don't look that young anymore. So we've got that covered.
Thanks, James. I can always count on you. And then we have Richard Harris. Richard is a chair of the insurance committee at Trust and Estates. Trust and Estates Journal is the preeminent wealth management publication for wealth management professionals serving the high net worth, charities, not-for-profit organizations, and family businesses. Richard is a life insurance consultant, a forensic consultant, and an expert witness, and by many he's known as just a brilliant mind in that space. Richard's nationally known for his knowledge, his creativity, his integrity, his independence, and his helpfulness. He has the ability to take complex and make it simple. And as a professional, life insurance professional, he helps attorneys, accountants, trust officers, and family offices regarding their life insurance questions and issues. And Richard's an accomplished speaker. He is a contributor on many different nationally recognized publications, and he's the author of 3 books, one being Advanced Planning with the Ultra Affluent, a framework for professional advisors. So Richard, thank you for joining us. And that was a mouthful.
Thank you very much. And I just want to add that my wife says I'm wrong.
That's funny. All righty, well, we're going to jump in, guys. And I just want to share, right now, we are going through some interesting times when it comes to all the proposed bills, even some of the new bills. And there are a couple of them that I just want to kind of point out, and then we're going to jump into our panel discussion. There are a few proposed bills that are out there that are mentioning about reducing the estate tax limit. So right now, a husband and wife has a $23.6 million estate tax limit exemption that they can give either upon their passing or while they're alive. There are plenty of bills that are out there. We're seeing a few of them that are looking to reduce that limit down to about 7 million. So we're going to try to encompass some of these discussions today around that. Also, there's the estate tax rate. Right now, the estate tax rate is about 40%, and there are proposed bills that are looking to go from anywhere from 45 to 65%. So we're going to be talking a little bit about that. Increase in capital gains rates. I'm sure many of you have seen that, have heard about it. Basically looking to double the rate. So how do we navigate around that? loss of the 1031 exchange provision. So we're going to have a little bit of discussion somewhere around that, and James is going to share a little bit of what he's talking about with some of his real estate families and clients that he works with. And then changes to the 7702 rate. That rate may not, that tax code may not mean anything to you, but it has impact on life insurance contracts because of the crediting rate. So reducing the rate from 4% that's been there to approximately about 2%. So Richard will probably touch on that. So these are some of the issues that we are dealing with, that you are dealing with, and we're having to navigate as advisors serving families such as yours. So, so you guys ready? We're going to jump in. All right, looking forward to it. So I want to start with my friend John Daticus. John, you know, there's some major tax proposals that are going to impact the estate planning world. Could you kind of speak to them, what some of them are, the effective dates, things such as that?
Sure. Thanks, Chad. Thanks, everybody. Clearly, there have been many proposals. You can even go back to the election and read some of the proposals back then, but there are 3, maybe 4 different proposals out there. Specifically with the estate tax, the idea is, do we roll it back to the pre-Trump era tax rate, which would roll back the exemption to 5.35 million. And right now, as Chad said, each individual has 11.7 million. Give you an example of that. If for a husband and wife having over the limit of exemption amount, the tax savings or avoidance of that is close to $4.7 million. And if you add in to it the federal, any state taxes like New York and some of the other states, there are 12 states that have 17 states really that impose a death tax. So you have to look at it from one of the things this is such a moving target. You hear about what's happening with the infrastructure bill and then the other infrastructure bill. Clearly, they have to get 50 senators to buy in if this is going to be reconciliation. Reconciliation will not come until the new budget comes out September, October 1. So the effective dates may be a little bit amorphous here, but there are, as I said, 3 or 4 plans. They could change the exemption amount, reduce it back to the 5.35, or even go back further. That was in Biden's election to 3.5.
Yeah.
Or they could add capital gains tax and what we call eliminate what we've called step up in basis. This was tried back in 1976 and got repealed in 1981. And there's another significant tax that's proposed, which is an immediate capital gains tax that won't start until 2030. So, you know, the possibility of that it happens. On top of it, there's another proposal by Van Hollen that basically takes away step up in basis. That's going to be effective January 1, 2021. And basically
2021 or 2022?
2021 on Van Hollen, right? And the Sanders bill, which is also interesting, and he adds in new rates, 45%, 50% rates. As I said, this all goes through reconciliation. There are at least 2 senators that are basically the key senators on this. Senator Manchin from West Virginia and Senator Sinema from Arizona. Additionally, there's Senator Tester, who's against the capital gains proposal. Reading the tea leaves, you know, it may be just a negotiation ploy, all this capital gains stuff. So you may come out seeing that they didn't propose the reduction in the estate tax, but it may be a simple way to get over the finish line to reduce the exemption back to the pre-Trump era. And one of the things that people should really think about is that this is a time to do something, and get the at least thinking about using up as much exemption as you possibly can, even if you're under the 20+ million, $22+ million exemption amount. You should really plan, even if you're under the $11 million exemption amount. You do not know where this is going. So, recommendation is to get to your estate planner, figure out the best way. There are spousal lifetime access trusts that people should be considering that would be the best bet for a lot of clients.
Great. Yeah, John, you and I were talking just yesterday or 2 days ago, and we were having that conversation about the probability of this happening, where, in years past, the probability was maybe much lower, but I think the probability of some of these bills being enacted are much higher than they've seen. Because, I've had clients who have said, yeah, Chad, but we've seen this stuff. And I said, yeah, we've seen this, but we haven't seen the trifecta, which is really what we were talking about, is where, a lot of these bills have a high probability of being passed, which I'm recommending to our clients. We really need to think about this. Like, we can't sit back and just kind of see how it plays out at this point.
No.
You hit the nail on the head of the trifecta. All of these occur when you have the president, the House, and the Senate at least aligned, and Trump got his through because he was able to push through with a reconciliation bill. Obama got his through reconciliation bill. It's always the reconciliation bill that's going to be the most important part. That's where you don't have a 60-vote filibuster concept.
Yeah, Joy, you were going to say something?
Yeah, and I think it's interesting also that the bill is already well formed. That for the 99.5% Act that Bernie Sanders has proposed, which would reduce the exemption from 11.7 million down to 3.5 million, has some real meat on the bones. It has very specific terms, and while I think that there's going to be some moderation in the numbers, as you suggested, probably a return to the pre-Trump era, which would be an exemption of around $6 million and a tax rate of maybe 40-45%, something in that neighborhood, not the 65% that's being discussed right now under the Act. But what concerns me as a planner is that there are some real structural changes in the bill that are going to really impact how we can plan. You mentioned, John, slats, and that's a particular strategy that, really helps our clients to push out a lot of their appreciation, so that you can put an asset into the trust, and as it grows, that appreciation is outside of your estate forever and ever, and never gets taxed in a subsequent generation, so long as it stays in the trust. That's current law. The structural changes that we see in this for the 99.5% Act are really going to impact that kind of planning strategy. And I think, not to get too political, you're not going to see on a billboard, hey, Joe Manchin saved your grantor trust for you by not voting for this bill. You're just not going to see it.
Yeah.
What we have is a really well-formed piece of legislation that can just be attached to the next highway bill. So I think that makes it a little bit more likely to pass, not just because of the trifecta, but because it's so well formed, and because these are ideas that have been discussed. Every time we say Bernie Sanders, everybody kind of tunes out a little bit, because it's like, oh, well, he's really progressive, and he's not even a Democrat, he's a socialist. Like they kind of put it aside. But these are moderate Democratic ideas that have been kind of talked about for the last 10, 15 years. And that really makes it more likely to pass and more likely to come to fruition.
Well, thank you, Joy. Before we jump on to the next question, I don't know if Richard or James just wants to, share a little bit for a moment.
Well, just to add to the discussion here and piggyback on what you had said earlier, Chad. Yes, we've seen some of these concepts before, But I think, you know, I'm big on the local legislative threats, and I take a lot of my cues from what we're seeing in the larger cities across the country. And I think that there's now enough of an established blueprint where we see these kind of methodical changes, where there's been shifts that have been percolating in these larger markets and in these bigger cities. And of course, that has impacts across the country, and it's now kind of elevated. I do think that we're in for some significant change.
Yeah, agreed. Well, we're gonna jump to the next question, and we're gonna continue to just chew on it and work through it. Joy, you and I were talking, and we were talking about some of the things some strategies that people maybe want to you're recommending to clients right now, to really take advantage of where we are currently. Maybe you want to share on that, and then I'd love to kind of hear the rest of the panel's thoughts on some of the things that you're sharing.
Well, I think that the Grantor Trust is probably, the premier strategy out there, that we've been really leveraging that strategy for years now, and it's really dotted the planning landscape, sort of like dandelions in my front yard, and of course the reason is because a Grantor Trust has this very special and unique characteristic where I get to put assets outside of my estate. I give it away. It doesn't belong to me anymore, but I get to pay the taxes on it. Yeah. And why is that a benefit? The benefit to that is that those assets are going to grow income tax free while I reduce the size of my taxable estate by paying those taxes. So we really are able to kind of leverage that and get that asset, that bigger asset, out of the estate, allow it to continue to appreciate without incurring income taxes. And the strategy that I like the most, that I recommend probably the most, I mean, I must say it 400 times a day, and clearly John does too, is the slat. I love it. It's not just because it's fun to say slat, but because of the power that you get with it. So a slat is a spousal lifetime access trust. And the way that it works is I set up a trust for the benefit of my spouse. I put in $10 million. And there are specific terms in the trust that allow the trustee to make distributions to my spouse for his health and welfare and benefit. And maybe there's even some discretion that can be exercised, like he wants to go to Tahiti, and then the trustee can make a distribution to him for that reason. And so long as we're cooperating, and he'll continue to cooperate with me for the duration of our marriage, at least, which will be until death do us part, I still have access to it, right? Because he's going to share it with me. So even though I've given it away and it's outside of my estate, it doesn't get taxed when I die in my estate, even though all of those things are true, I still kind of retained a little bit of those strings. And, when you're a younger person, like, I know, Chad, you're not so young, you don't look so young anymore, but you are a little bit younger than some
James.
people. Not younger than Richard, of course, but, still, younger. That might be a good strategy for you, because we don't know what's going to happen in the next 40, 50 years that you're going to, probably live. I mean, people are living longer, especially the high net worth people. Our ultra high net worth people are living longer. And so we don't want to put those assets completely out of their reach, even though from a tax advantage, from a tax perspective, there's a huge advantage for doing so. And this also can help our small business owners, our closely held business owners, to kind of retain a little bit of interest in those closely held businesses, and also kind of manage how they're going to be governed on a going forward basis. Generally what I like to see is, okay, you put it into the slat so that the spouse has access to it, but maybe you put the kid who's, been running the business for the last 10, 15 years by your side, the adult child, maybe that person is one of the trustees, so that there's an opportunity there to continue to run the company and get more and more involved without actually having it in their personal estate. Because even though giving gifts outright is probably the easiest and the thing we understand the most, you're just creating a tax problem for your kid. Yeah. So put it in trust, keep it outside of their estate, and keep a little bit of access to it during your lifetime. I love the slat strategy, and that's really what I'm talking to my clients a lot about. Obviously, you got to worry about divorce and that kind of stuff, but for most of my clients, that's not a bigger concern.
Awesome.
Well, 2 points. One of the big advantages of a grantor trust is the fact that you can sell assets to a grantor trust. And if there's a gain in the value of those assets, because it's a grantor trust, there's no income tax consequence when you sell the asset to the trust. And a sale to the trust is not a gift. So that's one of the very important things in estate planning. The other thing about slats is the question is what happens when one spouse dies and they no longer have control of those assets and they no longer have access to those assets. And sometimes people will utilize life insurance to offset that and make sure that the surviving spouse is adequately provided for, even if they don't have access to that slat.
Yep.
Joy raises a good point too about considering if you've got this spousal lifetime access trust, where do you put it? You know, there's certain states that allow you to continue your trust for generations, and in fact, the arcane rule against perpetuity basically says that you can only have a trust that goes for lifetimes plus 21 years. Well, there's states like New Jersey, Delaware, and others that have abolished that rule. And so if you set up your trust in the proper jurisdiction, you're able to let it pass through the generations. And Joy also raises, you have at the senior generation who set it up, the divorce issue, but you also have to remember this is an asset protection strategy for your children because it's outside of their realm, and especially if it's set up properly with regard to creditors, including divorce creditors. So one needs to really focus on that. And Richard raised a great point with regard to the grantor trust rules. As long as we have them and can utilize them, you can leverage up. So you could, in fact, put in assets worth 22 million, but maybe you leverage that up and buy assets on a long-term basis from the family and start to push the appreciation into these trusts so that you can keep it going and at the modest interest rates we now have that are 1.72, etc. You're still having it come back to you. So there's a huge advantage in using the grantor trust rules.
Yeah.
And of course, that's one of the things that's on the chopping block, right? That for the 99.5% Act really does take, kind of a sledgehammer to this strategy, because what it's going to do is, whereas under current law, anything that grows in that estate, in that trust, is going to be outside of the taxable estate, for the 99.5% Act takes it all back in and now taxes it. So that's really the risk. Fortunately, it seems that the trusts that are established before enactment of the 99.5% Act, and that's important. It's before enactment. It's not before January 1st, 2022. It's going to be effective as of the date that it gets signed, which is why we're really trying to urge people to, get thee to an estate planner ASAP, because this is the time to be doing it. You really want to be setting up these strategies now. You don't want to wait until, it's on the president's desk. That'll be too late. It's not, we don't have until the end of the year. But everything that goes into that trust after enactment is going to the extent that it grows, come back into the taxable estate.
Yeah. Joy, as you were sharing that, I'm thinking of some of the clients that we're working with right now and some of the things that they're concerned about, which is obviously what you and John and Richard were sharing. But there's another part to this too that I really would love for Richard to weigh in on. And it's funny because part of our practice, we have 3 parts to our practice, right? Generational coaching and consulting. We have a whole life insurance acquisition side of it, and then tax efficient strategies. But on the life insurance side of it, I'm seeing something very interesting right now. And I'm seeing that these families that have been on the fence saying, I want to buy insurance, but I'm not ready yet, or I just need to to really take that next step. They're now taking that next step because of the 7702 change. So Richard, maybe you can kind of just share a little bit about that I mean, you're an industry icon when it comes to life insurance, and I know you're humble and you don't like when people say that, but the truth of it is that you've been at this for 50 years and you've been doing it at the highest level. What are the changes that happened to 7702? Families that are thinking about insurance, why does it make sense for them to do it now and not wait? And then how does that dovetail with the estate planning?
Well, 7702 judges what constitutes life insurance. And one of the things involved in that is there's an interest rate that's assumed for determining the cost of insurance and the cost of the insurance product. Now, the insurance carriers in a decreasing interest rate environment have had difficulty making profits. And by having this change, it allows the rate to be a floating rate rather than a fixed rate. And right now that floating rate would be 2%. So that what that means is, for example, for guaranteed contracts such as whole life, if they're using a 2% rate in determining reserves, the premium you pay is going to be substantially higher. It will be for universal life products as well.
Correct.
Some carriers have already repriced, others have not repriced. However, variable products are not affected by this because variable products, the individual is investing in sub-accounts, which are managed accounts investing in stocks or bonds or the like. So they're not tied to any particular interest rate, and they're not tied to the carrier's rate of return.
Awesome. Yeah, thank you for that. James, we're going to be coming to you in a moment on 1031 exchanges. I just before we do that, Richard, could you speak to how life insurance will be very effective in this new tax environment, even from an estate tax and from an income tax perspective? What are you seeing in that space, and why should ultra high net worth families be thinking about that stuff right now?
Well, life insurance has certain features to it that are unique among assets. One is that the cash value growth inside a life insurance contract is not subject to income tax until the policy is surrendered or lapsed. If the policy matures by the death of the individual, the death proceeds of a life insurance contract are specifically not subject to income tax. Additionally, life insurance is insurance on somebody's life, and it hedges against an early death. We know we're going to die. We just don't know when. Although my wife has told me that the day after I retire, she's shooting me. So that's why I'm still at work. But apart from that, there are two plays for the life insurance. One, there's been the play that it's always been where people have used it to create liquidity at death. And liquidity at death is useful to prevent liquidation of assets to pay taxes, such as family businesses or concentrated stock positions. And also, with the returns on life insurance today at death in the 4 to 5% range, they're very attractive as an alternative investment because the return is not contingent upon the performance of the stock market or anything else. So that makes life insurance attractive. The income tax feature of life insurance comes more into focus when you consider the changes in income tax rates, the potential of capital gains being taxed over a certain amount, et cetera. Now, you can put money in a life insurance policy, and as long as it qualifies as life insurance, when the individual dies, the death proceeds are not subject to income tax. There are policies such as private placement life policies. They're policies that are only available to accredited investors, and they have investment choices beyond the normal investment choices that you would see in a variable life policy. These policies can also incorporate existing money managers. So if a family has a money manager running their money for them, they can have that money manager run the money inside a private placement life policy. Now, two things about that. One, the growth inside the policy is not going to be subject to tax. Two, at the death of the insured, the death proceeds, which will include the growth in the value, assuming there is growth in value of whatever the investments are, is not going to be subject to tax, regardless of whether there's a capital gains tax at death or not. This will not be subject to that. Now, that's special to life insurance. Additionally, there's a special rule that if you observe it, you can access money from a life insurance policy without paying income taxes, even if there's a gain. In the past, insurance companies, quick to look for business however they can get it, created products where you could buy a $100,000 policy and put $99,000 into the policy. So in effect, the amount of the death benefit was nominal. Your cost for it was nominal. And because of the rules at the time, you could access that cash value by either withdrawals or loans without paying income tax. The caveat is you had to die with the policy in force. If the policy lapsed or was surrendered, it triggers the income tax event. Congress did not like that. So in their regulations about insurance, they created what's called a modified endowment contract. If you have an annuity, you know that while the inside growth of annuity is not subject to tax, if you have gain and you access any cash from the annuity, it's gain first and it's taxed as ordinary income. When somebody dies and that gain is accessed, that gain immediately becomes taxable as ordinary income at the death of the annuitant. Well, Congress said if you put lump sums in, we're going to tax you as though it's annuity. However, it's still going to be life insurance for death purposes, so there won't be a tax at death. However, there's a way to structure life insurance so that it's not taxed as an annuity. And basically, that means paying premiums in over a certain number of years. 4 years is usually a good number to go by, but it varies by product. If you put, instead of putting $4 million in a policy, you put in $1 million a year for 4 years, you're not treated as though it's a modified endowment, and you can access the cash in the policy by loans and or withdrawals up to basis. As long as the policy stays in force when the individual dies, there will not be an income tax, and there's no income tax when you take the money out. This is true of ordinary life insurance policies.
Yeah, Rich, I was just going to say, and that plays such a vital role, especially if capital gains taxes are going up, where you now have the ability to utilize a vehicle that grows deferred, can come out tax-free. So it has a tremendous impact there.
Yeah, and let's take trusts, existing dynasty trusts, or family offices that are administering dynasty trusts, or family offices that are just managing money outside of trust. You do this with a life insurance policy. The individual dies, you collect the death benefit, wash, rinse, repeat. So you start a new policy on a new individual, and you keep the cycle going so that all the investments inside those policies are never subject to income tax.
Yep.
So that is a very, very smart play. It may
I
be a
think-
smart play for businesses also that own life insurance if they're accumulating money and they don't want to pay taxes on the investments they're making while they're accumulating it.
Yep.
They can purchase insurance, and if it's not a modified endowment, they can have access as long as the individual dies with the policy still in force.
Richard, thank you. John, you were going to say something?
Richard mentioned, and he's right on about this, private placement life insurance is clearly, especially if these rates on capital gains get pushed up, clearly become a huge wrapper for individuals, because even, they're not as well effective, but an individual has just a regular off-the-shelf variable will be able to avoid capital gains tax. And, if they need the money down the road, they can, as Richard points out, borrow from the policy. But if they don't, it grows all income tax free, including capital gains tax. So if you've got, growth, a growth portfolio, you're going to more than likely want it in some type of variable wrapper that's quite efficient. And as Richard points out, if you have a passing early in life, you're going to get a better IRR than if you hold it to maturity. But even on a universal or whole life policy, the crediting is going at 3-4% today, whereas you can't get that guarantee with U.S. Treasuries or muni bonds, and so you're so much better off in utilizing a life insurance product as that alternative investment.
Yeah, it's
Two points about this. One, private placement life insurance is institutionally priced. What that means is your average cost all in is going to be 80 basis points or less. So if you look at your existing assets and you have assets that are producing taxable income that are the equivalent of 80 basis points or more on the value of the asset, you should be looking at private placement life insurance. In addition, even if you're not, the variable life insurance policies are very, very attractive. And there's one thing new in variable life insurance policies that's important in estate planning. Some policies will guarantee the death benefit regardless of the performance of the asset. In the past, people have been buying guaranteed universal life policies to assure the death benefit is payable at their death.
Mm-hmm.
Because of the drop in interest rates, the companies that were selling them have been hurt badly. And those that are continuing in the marketplace have raised their prices substantially or have gone out of the marketplace completely. This variable product, if you look at it and you look at the upside potential of the variable, the underlying investments in the sub-accounts, makes a compelling estate planning tool.
Yep. Well, Richard, thank you for that. I think families that have large real estate portfolios, families that have large business interests, life insurance is a very important part of it, and structuring it correctly is important. And to your point, with all the tax changes, it's a great product that allows you to really reduce or mitigate a lot of that. So thank you for sharing. James, we're going to jump to you right now on a question. You and I have had conversations in the past about the legislative threats things that are happening right now when it comes to real estate. You do a ton of work with, you know, large developers and stuff like that. But what are you seeing from the new administration as it comes to some of these sweeping 1031 legislation changes, and how do you kind of foresee that impacting the real estate space? And then I'd love to have John, Joy, and Richard kind of jump in as well and kind of have a discussion around that.
Sure. So for us, we've always looked at this as two different buckets, right? There's the vehicle that has to be assembled, the work that you do, Joy, Richard, John. There's the vehicle that's going to protect the gains as we move forward and protect the gains as they exist today, right? That's one part of the puzzle, and I don't think it's ever been more critical to focus on that side of it with these changes as they come down the pipe. For us, we try and focus on the other side, right? You take care of the structure, but we need to figure out the secret sauce of, as these changes continue to come down, how are they going to impact the individual markets? Where is their opportunity? And try and stay ahead of where we see that these legislative changes are going to create pinch points in certain asset classes where we want to be ahead of the transition, right? So we've talked about this on the local level, and now on the federal level, as John had talked about earlier, potential elimination for the step up in basis, loss of bonus depreciation, essentially loss of the benefit of the entire program at all if it's any type of deal of size. I think it's $500,000 or more. So what does that create, and how does that translate into finding opportunity? So for us, we began a few years ago, as you know, shifting out of the bricks for bricks model, whatever that asset class may have been. We thought that it was time to shift from multifamily specifically because of our local legislative threats, and we began to get into different markets of industrial, manufacturing, logistics, technology, medical, alternate energy, anywhere where we saw the current and future potential administrations where there would be subsidy that was public subsidy and continued investment on the private side. With that, and you've heard me say this now for years, the decentralization of real estate that we've seen across these major cities had us moving the assets not only from specific classes, but into different geographical regions, places where we thought that there was some upside and opportunity. It will be interesting to see how this plays out with the actual vehicle and mechanism. Unfortunately, I think we're headed for a freezing of assets, quite candidly. In large part, what options do you have left if you're not able to enjoy the step up in basis generationally, and you don't have the benefit of sheltering the gains as you move from asset to asset? We looked heavy into opportunity zones, as you know, something that we were really excited about and we remain excited for, but again, it's not time tested yet. That allows us to exchange bricks for human capital and micro investments into businesses. But now we're seeing legislatively, at least here in New York, there's already legislation proposed to decouple the federal benefit from the state. And it's retroactive. I think only your 19 and 20 at this point in the bill's current iteration would remain protected from that decoupling federally. So we have to watch closely. The institutional lenders play into this, right? We see, instances where the CEO from Chase recently talked about $500 billion that they have on the sideline waiting for things to stabilize, more certainty in the market so they can get back to lending. A lot of this money is getting dropped into the overnight, and that also creates a crunch, but eventually the dam has to break. So for us, it's let's get into those asset classes in the right geographical location for when that additional institutional money starts to come, we're positioned to enjoy some growth.
Yeah. Joy, what are you seeing when it comes to some of these real estate families, 1031s, or even John, if you want, John and Richard want to jump in on it?
Well, so one of the things that, has always been somewhat of a challenge is that, we're always talking to people about, how to move their assets so that they can get an estate tax advantage or a gift advantage. And the problem is that giving assets away is just not as good as dying when you hold them, right? When you die with an asset under current law, you get a step up in basis, which is huge, because then you can get a cost segregation analysis and you can really maximize your depreciation deductions on a going forward basis, or you could sell the asset and not have a gain if you're the next generation. But when you move those assets into a trust, you lose that step up in basis. That's kind of the drawback, I guess, if you will, of moving the asset into a grantor type trust. The grantor trust can still do 1031 exchanges, at least under current law. So those opportunities are still available. But unfortunately, if they take away the basis step up, if they take away 1031 exchanges, I think that what we're going to be talking to our clients about more is probably some kind of charitable trust planning. And that might be the way that we can kind of help them to avoid these deemed recognition events, the damage that could do to a closely held business.
Yep.
So the way that would work is you put the asset into some type of a charitable trust. Charitable remainder trust is probably the one I would go with. And right before the deemed recognition event or the recognition event. And then the gain is recognized in that trust. But because the trust is treated as a charity for income tax purposes, it doesn't have a tax liability. And then as income gets distributed back to you, because you retained an interest in that asset, so every year you're going to get some amount based on the terms of the trust, based on the regulations that govern it, you'll get some annuity every year. And I use the word annuity kind of colloquially, because it doesn't mean the same thing in this context, but you're going to receive a payment every year, and that payment will be some part ordinary income, some part capital gain, some part principal, and based on what was earned in the trust. But in this way, you'll be able to defer that gain for a longer period of time, probably for 20 years. So that is an opportunity that we're kind of looking at, because it doesn't look like the new legislation that's been proposed really attacks charitable planning, which kind of makes sense if you think about the people who are behind it, that they probably want to encourage people to contribute to charity. But that might be an opportunity that we're sort of thinking about and kind of batting around. I don't know really what else we're going to be able to advise people on, because at this point, based on what we're seeing, it's really just going to be about damage control. It's going to be about mitigation, of loss, and trying to figure out the best opportunities to avoid recognizing gain right away.
Awesome.
Going back to one idea and the difficulty and just understanding how you're doing things, holding things. So clearly, going on with if we continue to have carryover basis, which clearly is very important in the estate field, but it's also important to get the asset out of the estate for estate tax purposes. So you have to keep that dynamic. And if we have the grantor trust rules in place and the carryover basis rules, the idea should be to make sure that those assets that have low basis that you put into these spousal lifetime access trusts, that you can pull it out and exchange the property. I mean, a good example of this was with the New Orleans Saints, when he, for different reasons, but he pulled out he put the team into a grantor trust, and then later pulled it out of that grantor trust into his own name. When he died, he had it in his own name, and it clearly got a step up in basis, even though he had to put substitute assets of equal value at the time of the exchange. So it's very important to understand these trusts are living items, dynamic. You need to watch them. I have clients who have grats. They watch them monthly, not just at the annual, rest date, but they watch them monthly. If the stock has gone significantly higher, they're going to take it out of that grat and substitute other assets in. So, this is Joy and I constantly work with our clients, making sure that the asset mix is right, what's happening in the family is right, and what's going on. And, clearly if they eliminate the capital gains grantor trust issue or the step up in basis issue, we've got to redeploy our thinking of how to do this, and you know, charities are going to be right. Even offshore foundations may be a way to go.
Yeah, it's definitely not a set it and forget it. I think, you know, as we work with these families over the years, I think as entrepreneurs, you kind of like, you say, all right, well, I built it now. Okay, great. I don't need to necessarily look at it, but it's like, it's almost like your business. You're always making tweaks and iterations and changing and refining, right? And I think when we're talking about this planning, especially in this environment that we're in, we're always having to go back and look at it and tweak it and change it and really make different iterations. Richard, we don't have much time. We have about 2 minutes, but then I want to, so just for 2 minutes, I'd love for you to just high level share about basis swap, because I think that's a very real option for these clients that have large real estate portfolios that are maybe looking to sell those properties. And can you just speak to it just for a little bit? I know that conversation could be a whole long hour conversation, but for the purposes of today, just to at least share it with them, so whoever's listening could at least say that's something maybe I should think about.
Right. This has to do with partnership law. And if you have two or assets that are in a partnership that have different bases, you can swap the basis of one asset for the basis of the other asset. Now, using private placement life insurance, let's say somebody has an asset worth $20 million and it's been depreciated, it's been financed, it's now cost basis is $1 million. So there's going to be a big realization event, the asset sold. Borrow $20 million from a bank, use that $20 million to purchase a variable life insurance policy, a private placement life insurance policy, inside a partnership that you create that'll own both assets. I believe the time limit is 2 years that you're going to have to wait before you can swap basis. Once the 2 years are up, you swap the basis of the life insurance contract to the real estate. So you sell the real estate now with a $20 million basis. Now, what happens to life insurance? It's got $1 million basis. The insured dies. Is there any tax on life insurance proceeds? No. So, in effect, if you can do that successfully, you have finessed the tax problem that you have with a low basis asset. There's a lot more to it than that, but that's basically it. There's one more technique I'd like to get into very quickly, and I want to advise people. There's a way that's unique to life insurance. There are special rules regarding this, but there is a way to purchase life insurance in a trust where there are no taxable gifts, no estate tax, no generation skipping tax, and as long as the grantor trust rules are in effect, no income tax, regardless of the amount of the premium that you put in. So I've had people put into trusts. Just recently, somebody put in $11 million to purchase a life insurance policy, and they're loaning it. And the loan is for the life of the insured. It doesn't have to be repaid till the death. Current long-term interest rates are 2.07%. So in effect, your life insurance policy has to outperform a hurdle rate of 2.07%. And if you make a one-time loan, that rate is locked in forever. So that's an opportunity that you have. That's an opportunity you will have, even if all of the other benefits go away. The only thing that will affect it, if they change the grantor trust rules, the grantor will have to pay some income taxes on the interest that they receive. Other than that, the gift, estate, and generation skipping benefits remain.
Awesome. Thank you, Richard. So we're coming to that point. We're about an hour in. I'd like maybe just 60 seconds each, guys, or maybe even less than that, 30 to 45 seconds each. Just recap for our audience what you would like them to take away from what was shared today, and then we're going to jump into the Q&A. If there's any questions, we're gonna start that. So if anyone on today's panel discussion has any questions, you could type it into the chat box, or you could raise your hand and we will open up your mic. But with that said, Joy, why don't you start?
Yeah, so I think that planning needs to be done now. You need to get, even if you're not really comfortable planning because you don't know what's going to happen, get ready to plan, have it all set up and ready to go. And collaboration is the most important thing. It really, you've got to have people, professionals around you who know what's going on, who can look at different things. Your accountant is going to look at it from a different perspective. Then your attorney and your insurance provider, you all need to be working together. You're the quarterback, we work for you, but we should all be working together. Collaboration is probably the most important thing that I hope people can take away from this.
Awesome.
Amen.
Thank you, Joy. Richard, why don't you share 30, 45 seconds, biggest takeaway, or something you want them to
The biggest
walk away with?
takeaway that I can give you is, from my perspective, I've given you ideas. They don't necessarily fit your situation. The only way you're going to know is to have somebody look at your situation, do an analysis based on your goals and your needs to determine whether or not any of the things that we're talking about make sense.
Yeah, awesome. Thank you, Richard. James, how about yourself?
Sure. So I think it's important we understand this is not a repeat of history. This is a different moment in time. Changes are coming, pretty profound changes. And as I noted before, there's two sides of the transaction here. We cannot rely on the traditional methods of investing where in certain demographics and certain locations, we enjoyed appreciation just because, time came off the clock, right? I shouldn't have bought that lot in New York City 20 years ago, right? Said no one ever until now. There are ways and methods to make sure you're getting into the right asset types and in the right locations.
Awesome, thank you. And John, how about you?
Yeah, not to take from a tragedy, but we all know that the tragedy in Miami, and clearly things do happen. And it really means in this to do it as soon as possible, to protect yourself. This is a protection strategy. And these strategies protect your family and the way of life that you've grown to enjoy. And clearly, I would say, get it done now, then wait until the fire bell rings.
Yeah, I am with you. When we're working with clients, John, I know that they're busy. I know they got a lot going on in their life. They got multiple businesses, their families. Listen, everything's competing. But this is the thing that I think I'd like our listeners and our listeners to hear from my heart is that you've given up so much of your life to create businesses, create your family, create the real estate portfolio that you have. And I always look at it from a risk reward. Where's the downside of taking a little bit of your time, 1, 2, 3% of your time to protect 100% of what you've given the last 40, 50, 60 years? And in some of the instances, people on here are 150, 200-year-old family businesses. So my thing would say, while we're living in a crazy world, these opportunities are not going to exist for much longer. Block out that time. It'll make such a major difference, and it'll allow you to be very proactive and not react. So I appreciate all of you being on today. And Danielle, not sure if we have any questions or anyone raised their hand. So if not, we will call it a day. But if so, we will open up their mic.
Hi, everyone. We do. We have one question from Jennifer. And Jennifer, I will open up your line and feel free to introduce yourself and your question.
Great. Hi, Jennifer.
So I have unmuted her. It just says that she's self-muted.
Oh, okay. Hi, Jennifer. Can you hear us?
Okay. I can read the question.
Why don't we do that then?
Okay. So her line is unmuted if she can hear us and wants to join. But it's regarding the SLAT idea. Other than covering the donee spouse with life insurance, do you have any other solution if the donee spouse dies prematurely? Along with the same lines, what about the risk of divorce? How to mitigate that risk?
John, why don't you field that one?
It clearly you necessarily need to understand how spousal lifetime access trusts work and make sure that the attorney who is working to prepare these and draft it understands all of these issues. So the first issue is a very important issue, and a good attorney will draft into those documents ways that will trigger a comeback to the asset. So in mine, I basically have a provision that will allow the asset to be redeployed back into the person who basically gave the gift by using a limited power of appointment. And also the ability to borrow money from the fund during lifetime, so that those are ways to do that, making sure that the trustees are the right trustees. With regard to divorce, it's very interesting because clearly the divorce courts have taken and started to recognize trusts that have been created during lifetime, during the marriage with marital assets. And to the degree that both spouses are being participants, there is still a basic asset that is included, at least I know in New York, with regard to that. So it's really not outside of the marital realm in a divorce.
Awesome. Thanks, John. Joy, Richard, you guys want to just jump in on anything?
Well, I did want to add, so the problem, of course, with that is that if the assets are kind of pulled back in as part of the marital estate, and the donee spouse is going to still be the beneficiary of that, then that reduces what the donee spouse will get from the other part of the the rest of the marital estate that's not in trust. So you really do want to think very carefully. So what do I mean by that? That means, okay, so my husband and I set up, I set up a SLAT for his benefit, and then we divorce. Well, the court is going to look at the $3 million of assets that's outside the estate, outside of the trust, and the $10 million that's in the trust. So they'll say, okay, you have a marital estate worth $13 million. But since Sean is a beneficiary of this trust, he's good. He has more than 50% of the assets in the marital estate. And Joy, you can get the other 3 million, which is okay for me. I mean, I lose the access to that 10 million, which isn't so great, but at least I've got $3 million that I can do whatever I want with. Whereas he's still restricted because as the donee spouse, he's just a beneficiary of the assets in that trust. So that is something that you're really going to have to think through and think about ways to maybe undo the transaction if you really needed to. And SLATs really are great strategies. They're not for everyone. I think to Richard's point, it's not a one size fits all, and that's why you want to really make sure your professionals are thinking about all of the things that are going on before putting a plan in place.
Correct. Richard, want to add anything before we hop?
Yeah, the one thing I would say, especially as an expert witness on life insurance transactions, I've seen transactions that sound wonderful, but when you put pen to paper and you run the numbers, they're awful. No, I'm not saying any of these transactions that we're talking about fall into that category. But what I am saying is that in addition to the discussion of the strategy needs to be modeled so that you can see the repercussions, especially under various scenarios that you may think are appropriate to look at.
Yeah. Great, thank you. And James, anything else on that topic?
No, I'm good to go here, Chad.
All righty. Well, we did it. We got it in 1 hour and 11 minutes. And for those of you that are on here, my wife and business partner Danielle Reyes, she will be sending an email out with the recording of today's panel discussion in the next few days. So take a look for that. Look out for that. It'll be coming in your email box. You'll receive it. I hope that it was tremendous value to you. If you want to shoot an email back at the end of this saying, you know, the impact that it made, we'd love to hear that. Or something that you take away. You know, I'm notorious for being known to say, what is your biggest takeaway? So I would love if you want to shoot back my wife Danielle an email and just say, this was my biggest takeaway. We would appreciate it. It definitely encourages us. We hope that there was value here for you today. And until next time, be well and look out for that email with the recording. All right, guys, I want to thank each panelist. You guys did a tremendous job, tremendous wisdom, and I appreciate you tremendously.
Thanks, Chad. Good job. Thanks, everybody.
Bye, guys.
Bye-bye.
Bye now.